What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Podcasters live stream tonight. As always, Scott Carson, your host here, excited tonight. And we've got a very special guest joining us here. You can see her here live. But before we dive into that, I wanted to just bring up a couple of reminders for everybody out there. So, great to have you. We do these every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Central Time. They are recorded. We do share them to YouTube and Facebook. So, thank you for registering. For those that are here live, for those that are watching us on a replay, make sure you click on the like button on either Facebook or YouTube and make sure you subscribe. Feel free to leave comments. We'd love to and ask questions there. We'd love to follow up with you guys as well. But once again, thank you for joining us on the Podcasters live stream. Like I said, we try to do them every Wednesday night if possible. And it's a variety of great content, great podcasters and experts out here to help you really boost your podcast and take it to the next level out there for everything. So big shout out to one of our sponsors, Podcast Business Journal. Ed Ryan over there does a great job. If you aren't subscribed to it, go do it now. Go to podcastbusinessjournal.com. It's free to do it. Such a bevy of great knowledge there. We've had some, actually had some of our previous guests and also some of our future guests are actually authors and I can't even speak tonight, are sharing great content on there, their own articles and things like that. So glad to have you join us there, and big shout out to everybody who joins us there. But anyway, we had an amazing event last, just over a week ago in Orlando, our Mass Media Mastermind. What a great time with those that showed up. We had, it was a huge hit. We had a few last-minute cancellations for people that couldn't make it, but what a fun time. I have gotten some great testimonials from those that attended. People really went out of the way to share bookings or having people on each other's podcasts. They're sharing marketing tips and tools. Hey, this is what we use. Hey, this is how to use this. This is how to make this effective for you. How to drive more engagement, which is what we're all looking for, along with growth opportunities. I know, we're all looking to grow our show. So besides bookings and marketing, there's some other great things that we shared at the Mass Media Mastermind that stays in the Mass Media Mastermind. So really some eye-opening stuff, some big changes happening out there, some really cool stuff people are doing, new media channels that people are diving into and sharing to try to help drive everybody for a couple of big names out there. Some people talking about sponsorships, how are they monetizing their show, sharing some of those secrets, things they're doing. Obviously, great networking. We had an amazing VIP red carpet dessert party that Stephanie Goodman did an amazing job there at Epcot for the last night of Illuminations. Everybody just absolutely loved it. It was kind of funny. A group of us out there and Epcot just packed. All these people looking down like, who the heck are those people that got VIP spots for everything? So good job to Stephanie Goodman for that. And then just so many tools and tips. Just such a great event. But if you missed that one, hey, don't worry about it. Don't fret. We are going to do it again. The next one's going to be here in Austin, actually. And I've had a lot of people that reach out to me that couldn't make it to Orlando. They're like, hey, are you going to do one before the end of the year? We really want to kind of do this so I can help kind of boost my show into 2020. And so, yes, December 19th and 20th, we're going to be doing it in Austin, Texas, actually here at our offices for the Note Closer show. We've got some great spots here available for us. Only limited to the first 30 people. We want to keep it smaller, but to the first 30 people. Really excited about it. It's a Thursday, Friday, week before the holiday, so you can actually come out, get some good stuff, put some stuff implemented before the holidays and go out there. So we don't want to dive into your Saturday and Sunday Christmas shopping there for everybody. But anyway, we are excited for the content tonight and the rock star who is going to be sharing some great nuggets with you guys tonight. Absolutely jacked up. She's doing an amazing job. I was honored to be on a guest of one of her podcasts recently, but our special guest is an author, speaker, and host, and she's the host of two very successful and growing podcasts. One is the Men on Purpose podcast. Check that out. I believe it's in over 100 countries. People are listening to it now. The other one she just launched not too long ago is the Wickedly Smart Women podcast. I think it's in 19 countries now and rocking and rolling. So such a good, diverse audience, such great stuff. Definitely binge-worthy. You want to go out and listen to both of those. So if you like what she shares tonight, go out and listen to both those podcasts. Leave her a review. Give her a good 5-star review because this lady has such a huge heart for helping other people out there. She's the founder of Creative Age Consulting Group. She works with entrepreneurs across the country with their businesses. She was an entrepreneur, or I'm sorry, not was, still is an entrepreneurial artist for over 10 years now. She's from Nashua, New Hampshire. It's my friend, fellow icon of influence for New Media Summit, Emerald GreenForest. What's going on, Emerald? How's it going? Oh, I can't hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me.
There we go. I can hear you now.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear
Here we
me
go.
now? Okay, great. I've been having a little bit of microphone problems, but other than that, things are going awesome. And thank you so much for having me, Scott. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to share my message and be here with you and be in front of your audience. And I just want everybody to know, if you don't already, Scott Carson is the bee's knees. He's one of the best guys I've ever met coming out of the New Media Summit. He's got such a generous heart and was an amazing guest on my Men on Purpose podcast. So thank you so much for having me, Scott.
Hey, glad to have you there. And you know what we did? We also took the Men on Purpose podcast and we added it to our Best of Scott Carson show so people can listen to it in a variety of reasons, help to drive traffic to it for you as well there to you. But yeah, Emerald, why don't you share a little bit of kind of how you got into podcasting? Because I think you were kind of avoiding it for a while, and a story of mutual or numerous baby daddies, as I hear you say, right?
Exactly. I have plenty of baby daddies. So I actually had never even listened to a podcast. Podcasting was like way out on my radar screen. Like I had heard of it, but I had never listened to a podcast. I had no real interest in podcasts. And then in 2017, I rebranded, and I had been, my old brand was primarily serving women to help them feel great speaking and powerful asking for money. So I was primarily focused on women entrepreneurs. And as I went through this rebranding process, I had this epiphany and this piece of guidance, because I'm spiritually guided, that it was time for me to start serving men. And in the past I had had a few men, but it was mostly women. And so I said, okay, I'll serve men. And in this whole rebranding process, I felt like I could serve men because I had actually come from the real estate industry before I got into spirituality and the healing arts and personal and professional development and art and all of those other things. I spent 20 years in the real estate business. So, and my last project was 51 single family houses, 56 apartments, and an office building while I was the national chairperson of my trade association. So I knew I could have conversations with men and not, and it would be okay. You know, it would be a powerful thing, and that I had something to serve men with. So as we were going through the rebranding process, we were talking about doing a TV show, my branding person. And I was like, you know what? Men are not going to be necessarily watching any kind of internet TV show, but a lot of them are listening. You know, I can tell, I just knew that men would be listeners. And so the New Media Summit came up on the radar screen. Steve and I go way back. I was actually at his Internet Profits Live. I was a sponsor at that event several years ago. So when he launched the New Media Summit for the very first time, and he put the call out to his colleagues and friends and buddies and new podcasters, I said yes, and said, I'll go to that event. And when I came out of that event, I had, it was very clear I needed to build the podcast. So I built the Men on Purpose podcast, and I have 3 baby daddies. So Steve is baby daddy number 1, because he was the one who created the environment within which I was inspired and said yes to creating a podcast. Baby daddy number 2 was Doug Sandler, who is the host of Nice Guys on Business podcast, who very generously and thoroughly supported me to build my podcast from launch, from concept to launch. And then my 3rd baby daddy is Lou Diamond, who is on, he's the podcaster for Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond. And he's actually the voiceover in the intro and the outro of my Men on Purpose podcast. So I have 3 baby daddies. Yes.
Great guys. All 3 of them are awesome. Doug's a friend. I got a chance to meet Lou just recently in San Diego a couple weeks ago. Man, it's hard to believe a month has flown by for the most part, right, Emerald?
It has.
It's crazy. So let's talk about a little bit of this. So, because we got people on here that listen to this, people that are watching it, they're also very similar in nature. They're looking to work with clients, or looking to, not just on the spiritual side of things, but literally looking to help as coaches or counselors and things like that. And you've got really a great thing with your podcast is really a purpose. You've really leveraged that power alongside with what you're doing coaching wise, right?
Exactly. So let me just be clear. I am what you would call a hybrid coach, because I didn't throw away my 20 years of experience in the real estate business when I became spiritually awake. I have married those two pieces.
Right.
So I actually help people with practical strategies and spiritual technologies. And so the way the podcast has worked, and now I've launched a second podcast, Wickedly Smart Women. The way the podcast has worked is I actually bring people onto my show who then can potentially become clients of mine, and also listeners can potentially become clients of mine through a body of work that I call my Profitable on Purpose mentorship program. And what I do through that is I actually take people through a process of building their first high ticket program, and then building the talk that sells the program, and then laying out their promotional strategy so they can get on podcasts and webinars and teleseminars and telesummits to spread the word with their talk about their signature program. And so for me, a high ticket program is really anything above $5,000, but my preference for the baseline for a high ticket program is somewhere between $7,500 and $10,000, and they can go up from there to, $25,000, $50,000, $100,000 programs. So I help people to build, to really convert their wisdom into wealth. And so it's my Wisdom to Wealth, Profitable on Purpose mentorship program. And the podcast has been a beautiful tool for multiple reasons. Number one, it attracts people who are inspired and who are called and who feel like they have a purpose and they have a mission and they want to maybe learn how to get their message out, or they want to be inspired by the guests that we have on the show. Two, oftentimes the guests show up and they are only partially built out in their business model. And so I can really help them to leverage themselves to be able to generate more cash flow from their calling and be able to leverage their time so that they're really expanding their reach and not doing it on a onesie twosie kind of basis. And then the third thing that the podcast has done for me is it's given massive credibility. You have massive credibility. Once upon a time, it was cool to have the business card that was like made out of a piece of metal or like really thick vellum paper. And you'd give that business card and people would be, oh, this person must have credibility because they have this really fancy business card. And then we needed to have a book, right? Well, now if you have a book, you have credibility, you have authority. But if you're a podcaster and you are, certainly if you are ranking in the rankings, you have huge credibility. Now I'm press. I'm actually considered press. And so it was funny because I went to Soccer X last fall. I was asked by somebody to help them. She was speaking and she asked if I would come and help in her booth. And, speakers, we help one another. Podcasters, we help one another periodically. So I was at that event and I said, sure, as long as I can ask people if they want to be on my podcast. And she was like, yeah, no problem. And I was walking up to multi-millionaire, stadium owners and team owners of soccer teams and saying, hey, I have a podcast called the Men on Purpose Podcast. And so they were like instantly, I was able to have a door open for me that if I had a book and said, hey, would you like to take a look at my book? Or, hey, would you like to look at my fancy business card? They would have been like, get out of my way. I got other things to do.
So I want to bring that back up because I know some people that are either watching the replay or listening to this or catching things. That was you mean you weren't intimidated by somebody who's a owner that probably you didn't have the internal demons telling you, oh, they're not going to talk to you. They're not going to spend time with you. Did you experience that by any chance?
Not with my podcast. Not at all. Because I was like, I'm totally confident with my podcast. I can just walk right up to somebody and say, hey, yeah, I have an Apple Top 200. At the time, it was Top 200 ranked podcast called Men on Purpose. And the fact that I'm a woman with a show that's called Men on Purpose, that alone was a pattern interrupt for people. So, I mean, I have a lot of confidence anyway.
No, come on now.
I do. I have a lot of confidence anyway. But I will tell you, if I had not had a podcast, I never would have approached those people for any reason. I wouldn't have felt, I just wouldn't have felt like I could approach them, and I definitely felt like I could approach them having the podcast.
I think you're allowing a couple things. I think not only you've got like you said, the credibility because you've been doing it for a while, and top 200 is a great thing. Congratulations on that.
Yeah, it's now top 100. So yay. It happened 2 days ago. We hit top 100 with Men on Purpose.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
But it's kind of an ego boost for people to be interviewed. Hey, I'm part of the media. Would you like to be interviewed on my podcast? It's going out to these people and, especially something of a purpose. I think everybody has a purpose of some sort. It's not the same type of tell me about the stadium or tell me about what you're doing with this or people bothering them. You're literally and that's what I want people to realize. Those that either have an episode 1 they're rolling out or episode 1000. It's something to keep in mind. It's not you're begging them. You're offering them an opportunity to really share their message that's going out there. Right, Emerald?
Absolutely. My podcast is a platform now. 80. You said 100 countries, but it's actually 86 countries now that it's being downloaded for Men on Purpose. And it is an Apple Top 100 ranked podcast in the U.S. It's top 100 also in Uruguay, Ecuador,
right.
The UK, Australia. It's like it's in the rankings in not just in the US. And so, remember that you actually have a platform. And it's interesting because I spoke at an event. I think it was at the New Media Summit. And the stage is sacred. When somebody gives you the stage, respect that they have given you sacred ground, just like you have given me sacred ground tonight, Scott. You have cultivated your listeners. You've cultivated your community of people. You've invested a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of passion to gather all of these people together. And it's an honor to be given platform. So if you're a podcaster, recognize that your stage is a sacred place for speakers. And I don't care who you are. It's only the people who have big heads, Scott, that don't recognize that you still need to work with other people in order to get your message out. So even people who are very, very famous, like Deepak Chopra, for example, would be a good example. He's still out doing podcasts or doing, stage presentations or being on TV shows or whatever. And it's not a given that you are always going to be able to be given these opportunities. So right. It's a really sacred place to have a platform to offer to other people and to showcase your own gifts and your own skills and your own talents.
Yeah, Deepak is still doing book signings. We had the good fortune of earlier this year, Stephanie and I were able to catch him on a Sunday night here in Austin, and he came out and signed books for about 2 hours for people and hung around, and it was really great getting a chance to visit with him and talk for him, and we're cracking up at how red his shoes were. I mean, he likes bright red shoes. It was kind of funny. But that's the thing is that it's it's not the same kind of thing. Yes, stage is great, but we have a virtual stage that's going out, not just to the people that are in attendance at the room. It's literally going out across the world. Mm-hmm. And I really believe it's the most secure type of free speech that's really left available out there.
Yeah, baby. Let's say thank you, Jesus, and thank you, God, and thank you, technology angels, for that, because we actually do get an opportunity to be completely free in what we're saying and who we're talking to and the questions we're asking. It's such a hugely creative space too. I love the creativity that you brought to the Men on Purpose podcast, and you're fun, and you're Scott, and it's a great place also if you go on shows where hosts are intentional. And I know you're intentional, Scott, and I'm very intentional. If you go on shows or you create a show that's really intentional, the listeners know. The listeners want the depth. The listeners want the intentionality. The listeners want the behind the scenes. The listeners are not interested necessarily in the, everything shiny and bright here kind of interviews. They want to have that sense of of connection and humanity being shown to them, even by people who are highly successful.
Mm-hmm. That's really good advice out there to those that are listening. Now, from your audience, I'm going to take it back a little bit, dive into a little bit more in your podcast. As you're hearing from listeners, because I know you're getting emails and things and clients too.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the things that you're hearing from? Let's just talk about your clients. Maybe some of the clients that you've converted from the podcast. Are there any things that they're kind of regurgitating back to you or sharing that they really love, that are kind of the hot points that really, hey, it really made me build rapport with you, even though I'm listening on the end of either my earballs or my eyeballs, and going from there?
Yeah, so I'll use as an example one of my clients who came out of the podcast right at the very beginning. And so, you know, for those of you who are podcasting, that's how I monetize my podcast, is people end up becoming my clients as a result of either listening or being a guest on the show. And he actually found me. He was like a completely random person. He was not somebody who was already in my, you know, my fold, shall we say. He wasn't in my fold, and he found me on Twitter because I post my episodes on Twitter repeatedly, and he reached out and he applied to be on the show. And when we had our interview, by the time we were done with the interview, he had already written a book, but it was clear that he hadn't built out his business to actually monetize, and he was working full-time at a job, and knew, he was like super called. He was like, I need to get known. And so his intention coming onto the show was needing to get known. And when we did the interview, I said to him, I said, I think I can actually help you to not only get known, but to be able to have this whole thing funded and creating more impact if we decide to work together. So we sat down and we decided to work together, and he ended up creating a whole signature program called, I can't remember the exact name of it, but what he does with his signature program is he helps school districts and municipalities to apply for grants in order to bring STEM initiatives into the education system. So he's very niched, very clearly dialed into workplace readiness. And so we built his whole business, his workplace readiness solutions business, as a result of him coming onto the podcast. And then what I ended up doing was I said, okay, I'm going to throw out the first interview because now you're actually really ready. And so we did a second interview, and he's super grateful because he's known now as the workplace readiness solutions guy. He's been getting speaking gigs. He sent me a picture of his first check for a paid speaking gig. And because of being on the podcast, that really initiated for him a whole massive shift in his life and in his of who he is, seeing himself. He now sees himself as an entrepreneur and a business leader, and as somebody who's here to make a big impact. So, yeah.
That's awesome. That is really awesome out there. So that's a couple things there. I think hopefully you guys took from what she was sharing on there. You don't always have to be prepared to start going out there and appearing as guests, as a guest on other shows. I love what you do, because when I was going through it, when you sent me the link to have you on the show, go through people applying to be on the show. Let's talk a little bit about that mental aspect and how it's different than, hey, just be on my show. Why don't we? Huh, Emerald?
Yeah, so totally. I have learned in my almost 40 years of entrepreneurial journey that it's important for me to be really valuing my time, right? And so just like the stage is sacred, my time is also sacred. And, I definitely will work with people and bring them on as guests who have a message, but they aren't fully built out with their business. That's not a problem because, Aaron was a great example of that. But I don't want, I'm not just, opening the door to anybody to be on the show. I am interested in either having, so in the case of the Men on Purpose podcast, either having men who are already on purpose, in my view, or men on purpose in the making, who are showing me through the application process, which basically vets them, who they are, what their vision is, how far along they are with it, you know, how serious they are. And not everybody gets on the show. I don't do a show every single day. I do Men on Purpose Monday, and that's once a week, and it's consistent, and every week I have a show. So there's only 52 in a year, right? Although last year, the first year, at the end of the year, I had moved that, last year I had moved. So I put a whole bunch of shows in the bank. I did a lot of recordings before I was moving because I didn't know what my new situation was going to be. And so I had I was backed up. I had a lot of shows, and I ended up at the end of the year doing a end of the year bonanza, anniversary bonanza.
Nice.
And so I had a show airing every single day of the work week. But for the most part, I only have a set number, a limited number of spots for people to be on the show. And so I need to vet those people carefully. And I had to cancel a guy on Monday, and that really actually irritated me because I'm very clear in my application process too. You need to have a microphone, a real microphone. Do not show up with a cell phone. We will not be recording. And he showed up with a cell phone. And I was like, dude, did you not read my stuff? And he was like, oh, I didn't get it. And then I went and looked in an email, and he actually had gotten it 2 days before. So now I'm like, you know, I don't even want you on my show because number one, you didn't show up prepared. Number two, you tell me that you didn't get the email, but I look in my email box and you had responded to me on that email. Like you're lying to me. Yeah, I'm not interested in that. So the application process, to the best of our ability, we try to keep it short and simple because we do have a secondary process that we take people through after we've said yes to them to collect more information. But at the minimum, we collect as much information as we can to make a wise decision about whether or not the person is, you know, is going to be a good fit for our audience and a good use of my time.
Do you also have like a qualification or like a survey or info collection form from listeners that they can opt into to learn more about and see if they could work with you?
I have not gone to that level yet. That's not true. So yes, I have a commercial in the middle of the show. And in that commercial, it invites listeners to apply to have a consultation with me. Yes, it does.
Okay.
And that is at timetomakeyourmark.com. And there's a whole application there for people to reach out to me to see if they want to consult with me. Yes. So the answer to that question is yes. And I just added another cool thing. I have a program called Audio Acrobat. It's like $20 a month, and I can send you my affiliate link for it if you're interested, Scott. The Audio Acrobat has listener lines that you can set up. And so I have a listener line that I've just set up so that my listeners can also call in and leave comments.
Does that work both with audio and video if you're doing like on this? Or
I don't know. I haven't gone that far. It's a phone number. So they can, and so now I'm putting into my show dial number, blah, 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 extension 3333, and leave a message if you want to feedback on this episode or on the show. So yeah, I'm getting ratings and reviews, and I have a listener podcast, listeners at menonpurposepodcast.com email box. And I've had people comment on LinkedIn, and, you know, so I try to collect those comments and share them and put them out there on social media as well. So I'm showing social proof that listeners are really excited about the show as well. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And you, in that middle of the show, you have that call to action. It's a thing that you do every episode, which is great.
Yeah. So I have an intro and an outro and a middle. And in the middle, it's like a 30-second commercial where I'm calling them to apply for a consultation with me. And I think we have a reminder in the outro as well to, you know, make sure to apply for consultation with me. So yes, I have that.
Good. That's a huge thing, everybody listening to here, is to make sure and offer something up for them to tag into. Like she said, there's multiple ways for people to connect: a phone number, an email address, you know, connecting on LinkedIn or other things. Because that's the thing I think a lot of people get worried about, is they don't get that. Let's just face it. When we get a comment, it's a good thing. We love that, don't we, Emerald?
Totally. We're
It's
like
such a
excited. Somebody's
get
actually
excited.
listening, really listening. It's
Yeah,
not
you're
just
really
numbers
listening.
it's not just numbers on a stat screen, right? We have an actual human being.
Right, and that's the best reward we have. Especially like I've done a live show before where we had 4 people call in and we did live coaching at night, one night with 4 people, and it was one of the most successful shows that we've done, and we've done it again. But those are great little things for people to connect with, and that's what I like about the live feature of things, or as people are listening, to give them that option where they can call in and you can still communicate with them. It may not be right up to date, but it's a great way still to get that one-on-one approach, that reaching out and really building that rapport. Like, really, I'm talking to Emerald? Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
always
yeah. Yeah, and when you're thinking about becoming a podcaster, you also become a star in some cases. People are like, oh my God, I'm talking to Emerald. Oh my God, I'm talking to Scott. I'm actually talking to Scott. So that's an interesting part of the journey, to learn how to just stay human and humble and be like, yep, you're talking to Emerald and we're having a lovely conversation and hopefully we can potentially work together. So one thing I'm going to do, Scott, which is on my get-to-do list that I have been thinking about, and now as we're having this conversation, it's becoming very clear to me that it's important for me to do it, is on that application form for listeners at the timetomakeyourmark.com. Right now, it's just a kind of a static form where people can fill out. But I feel like what I want to do is potentially put either a video in there in the form to just say, hey, I'm so glad you're here from the Men on Purpose podcast show. Obviously, something spoke to you. I feel like I want to put a little bit more personal touch in there. So that's going to be on my get-to-do list in the last quarter. And I think, whenever, because, if somebody goes to a form and then it's just this form, it's not necessarily as inviting as it could be right now. And so, yeah, that's the other thing I'll share with the podcasters out there. It's always a work in progress. Everything's a work in progress, always being refined, little pieces added, little pieces taken away. And yeah, I think that's going to go on my get-to-do list, is to put a little video on there to just say.
I think it's an easy thing to do. Make it faint. It does not have to be long. Less than 2 minutes is actually preferable, but it's just a great way to actually kind of guide your listeners a little bit more. So, hey, there's 5 questions. Please take the time. This is important.
Yeah.
This helps make a show successful. Helps me get a chance to learn more about you. And we'll talk about, these talking points or these things.
Yeah.
And I've seen an increased conversion ratio on our side too with some of our phones. The minute we put video up there, the conversion ratios went up versus people just clicking on the links. They actually went ahead and took the time to fill them out a little bit more. Yeah,
so maybe when we're done tonight, I'll just leave my video on and do I'm an action taking kind of girl,
There you go. Well, that's a beautiful thing. So I want to ask you something here. I see a question texted me from one of the folks watching tonight. With you having the Men on Purpose and the Wickedly Smart Women, what is some of the things that you've learned from the men's podcast that you're applying to the women's podcast?
Great question. Well, first of all, the men's podcast was an immense healing journey for me. I really did not know men well. My whole life, my experience of men was either addicted, abusive, or alienating. And so part of what has emerged for me as a result of doing the Men on Purpose podcast was a few things. Number one, I shifted my own perception away from focusing on all of these addicted, abusive men. And my focus shifted to seeking out and gathering magnificent men. And so for me, it was an immense healing journey. And it also allowed me to set up all my structures and my systems and get into a consistent, habitual practice of sitting down and having everything set up and doing my interviews every Monday. I usually do 2 interviews every Monday, and then I have enough in my bank to have the summer off. So everything that I built for Men on Purpose, I just cloned for Wickedly Smart Women. The other thing that I will say is that I have been able to now leverage the reach that I've created with Men on Purpose. We're in 86 countries. Now, when I do an interview, I say, hey, we've got a sister show. Please let your lady friends know. And so there's a cross-pollination that is now happening that's allowing the Wickedly Smart Women show to be uplifted, kind of riding the wave of the Men on Purpose podcast. And I think the third thing that I would say about what I learned from doing Men on Purpose that I've transferred over to the Wickedly Smart Women is, I think in general, just being a good interviewer. I've just improved my interviewing skills I've always loved to interview, and I actually had a radio show back in 2010 and ran it for 18 months, but I was completely ignorant at that point about how to monetize the darn thing. So I just got it was too much and I stopped doing it. But I've always loved interviewing, and it's one of the things that makes me a good mentor is I can listen underneath what people are saying, and then I can ask the next question to pull them out further. And so what it has done for me, the year and a half or year and 9 months that I've been doing the Men on Purpose podcast, has just honed my interviewing skills. And it's also honed my timing. Okay, I know exactly how much time I have. I know exactly where my breaks are. It's just given me all of those things. So great question.
Thanks. So I'm gonna dive a little bit deeper in there, because you said coming from a rough traumatic background with men, do you feel that the podcast, the purpose has actually helped to heal you a little bit? Has that
Totally.
actually helped you out?
The whole thing was a healing journey. Every single step of the way of doing Men on Purpose podcast was a healing journey. I found out stuff about men that I had assumed was incorrect, and then discovered I was incorrect. I found out stuff about men that, I had projected onto them that was incorrect. I discovered men who were deep and who had, deep purpose and calling and a spirit, and maybe show up in the world in a different way than a woman would, but there was so much depth that I did not know existed, and so much good that the men that I have on the show are doing in the world. And that's the whole intention of the show, is to elevate, celebrate, and spotlight men on purpose, because in the mainstream media, we have way too much of a spotlight on the men who are malicious, mean, malevolent, and making lots of mischief. And, that's where all the mainstream media is. And my calling was to okay, let's stop looking and focusing and attending to and shining the light on all the mess. Let's instead find somebody who's doing something magnificent and really elevate and celebrate and spotlight them.
Mm-hmm. Stephanie Goodman says that's the truth. Amen to that. There's too much negativity on social media. Mischief is one way to put it, as she says. And she says hello as well to there.
Hi, Stephanie.
That's true. But that's the thing, is you were able to go out and kind of focus on the good, leave the bad, the ugly, because there's so much of it in today's society, not just in social media, but the media is always negative.
Yeah.
And really go identify the people that you want to surround yourselves with, and really feel that good positive.
And what you focus on expands, right?
That is such a great, what you focus on is what you see. It's like our eyes. If you keep focusing on it, you're driving a car, if you're focused over there, you're going to go in the ditch. We have a really easy way of sabotaging our own journey if we keep focusing on the wrong things, or keep allowing people to take our attention away from our ultimate purpose of where we're going, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. And I had spent most of my life focused on all of this abuse that was happening, right? And the addictions, and I felt alienated, and I didn't understand them, and they didn't understand me, and all of this, and I was so entrenched in that way of being, and it, from childhood. And finally it became clear to me I was the single unifying thread in all of those relationships. So if I wanted a different experience, the only person who could create that different experience was me. And so the podcast has been an immense healing journey for me. And there's something else that the podcast did for me, and that is, I'm the kind of person who's, like I said, I'm an action taker. Okay, you give me the thing to do and I'm going to go do it. And generally speaking, I'm a high achiever. It's not something that I set out to say, I'm going to be an Apple top 100 person. It just naturally happens for me. I have that magic. It's like a superpower, and I'm grateful for it. But because those things happen naturally for me, many times in my life, I have not celebrated. I just have not celebrated well at all. And so the podcast also gifted me with this opportunity to start practicing celebrating. So every single time I get a new country, I have this beautiful group in New Media Summit, and thankfully we have this pod family, right? The pod family, I call it the pod family.
Yep.
In New Media Summit, where every time something great happened, oh, I've got another 1,000 downloads, or oh, I've got another country, I made a practice of celebrating. And now it feels like I actually can take in that I've accomplished something, rather than just, oh, I accomplished that, what's next? Oh, I accomplished that, what's next? Oh, I accomplished that, what's next? Kind of way of being in the world. And it's much more meaningful, and I feel just a lot more fulfilled and satisfied. So it's been a real gift. The podcast has been amazing. And I have pod pals. I have pod pals.
I like that. Hashtag pod pals, everybody. Hashtag pod fam, because I like to say, because that's why I have loved so much about the podcast and families. Everybody comes from different areas. We've all got different passions that we're doing. Our shows really do become our babies out there that we get excited about, and seeing the growth. And you're right. I don't think we celebrate enough victories a lot of times. And sometimes we take things for granted. We get so busy with life or so beat down on different things. I might, look back like, oh man, I had 1,000 downloads today. That's 1,000, downloads and listens. Things are good, and you kind of attract the tribe that you want to surround yourself with too, which really helps out when you're having a lower time or a slow month or things like that too, right, Emerald?
Exactly. And, for me, where I'm at right now in my own business and helping people convert their wisdom to wealth, my intention in my own life now is I am creating a wealthy life. And a wealthy life is the full measure of all of the resources that we have available to us, not just money. It's the time that we have to spend, our health, the information that we're intaking, which, as podcasters, we are feeding people with inspiration and motivation and success stories and trauma stories sometimes, and, stories of overcoming, and all of those wonderful things that we as podcasters have the opportunity to deliver into the world. And wealth is also the money piece, obviously the money piece, and it's fun with our friends and our families and our fellows who are on the journey with us. And so as the Wealthy Life Mentor, that's kind of my new moniker that has grown out of this whole process. I feel like the podcast is like both of the podcasts together, they're like central to building a wealthy life by design for me, and to also exemplifying what a wealthy life by design is, because I love interviewing and I love speaking. And so why not do the things I love to do and have fun and meet amazing people and fill my mind and my heart and my spirit with awesome information and spend my time doing things that are meaningful and make money, right? Why not?
Amen to that. That's a ching. That's a money sound there. So somebody,
you have your ching and I have my little money bag right here.
There you go. There you go. Bob just asked me a message to ask you a little bit more about some of your transitions to monetization from your guests. So you got people that listen and they apply to the show.
Yeah.
And you go through that. What's your next step if they meet your criteria for that stuff? Is there can you walk us through a little bit of that, of after they fill it out and agree to either been on the show, or there's a free consultation, as you said, you offer up at that halfway point.
Correct.
What's the next steps from there?
So when somebody fills out my consultation form, we take a look at it and we discern whether it's a fit based on the answers to their questions, whether I have something that I can offer to them. And if I do, then we get on the phone. Like, I don't mess around with a long funnel. I'm very much interested in helping people to act now on their inspiration and to say yes to themselves now, and not to be in thinking about it mode for months and months and months and months and months. The time is now for us to take action on building the life of our dreams, on having a wealthy life, on converting our wisdom to wealth. The world needs our wisdom right now. And my intent when I work with people is to activate them and then to amplify their capacity to be heard, so that their message and their wisdom and whatever it is that they're here to change the world with is out happening in the world, and not, in some drawer somewhere, or, in the dreams when they're going to bed at night. It's like now. So I take people directly into a conversation with me. And then from there, if it becomes a fit for us to work together, we're working together. And I have either one-on-one mentorship programs, or I have a group program, my Wisdom to Wealth group program, that I enroll people in periodically over the course of the year. I have several open enrollment periods for the Wisdom to Wealth group mentorship. So yeah, so people need to get on the phone with me, and then we can discern if we can play together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or if they're a good fit, because sometimes saying no is saying yes to your life, right?
Absolutely. And that's another reason why, I had a business where I had a lot of nurturing, and I had thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people on my list, and I just kept nurturing them, and, didn't have a whole lot of clients come out of that. I'm not saying I didn't have clients, because I had a multi-million-dollar business from home in my pajamas while I was raising my son by myself. But relative to the number of people, the number of conversions was small when I was doing all of this, like just nurture. And now I'm just like, okay, let's call you right to action. Get on the phone with me. Let's see if we're fit to work together. Let's get you moving. I love people who are action takers, and I love people who are called and who are committed to their calling and who are ready to invest and get going and set themselves up for a wealthy life by design.
What were some of the hurdles to getting started? Do you have any mental hurdles or things that wanted to stop you from kind of going that route initially?
With the podcast or with my business?
Launching your podcast and doing episodes?
Oh, no. As soon as I knew I was going to do a podcast, I was on it. I'll tell you the biggest hurdles. I'm an artist in addition to being a mentor. And so my biggest hurdle was I spent 17 hours of my time designing my show badge. 17 hours designing my show badge. And I just went through so many iterations of what can the show badge look like? What can the show badge look like? What can the show badge look like? So I have an attention to detail around the visuals. And so if there was any sticking point in the journey, it was getting the show badge done, which is kind of funny, but that's what happened.
As an artist, I can understand that a little bit, wanting to be get out there. And the beautiful thing is you can always tweak and change it at any time once you get the stuff approved, right?
Exactly. I don't think I'm changing anything. After 17 hours of doing that show badge, when I went to do the Wickedly Smart Women show badge, I basically took the Men on Purpose podcast badge fonts and I slapped my picture in, and I changed it from brown to white and changed the words to Wickedly Smart Women, and that show badge was done in 5 minutes. So.
There you go. For those that don't know, the badge she's talking about is your infographic. Basically, you're using as a upload to iTunes is kind of what people see out there. It's basically a 3,000 by 3,000 pixel image that you want to create and make it look good, so it shows up when people are scrolling through, searching in different categories and things like that. And I love the Men of Purpose of the guy walking on the beach in the back, kind of looking at the back and going from there. And then definitely the Wickedly Smart Women is a great one too.
Wickedly Smart Women was me. I was just okay, I'll be the wicked.
There you go.
Face of that badge. Right? I can be the face of that badge. And so, yeah.
Is there anything on your journey here in the last, you said the year and 19 months. Is that correct?
So it's January of 2018, January 11th of 2018, and today's the 10th of, or the 9th of October. So it's been a year and 10 months in a couple days. Yeah.
What's been one of the biggest surprises that you've learned, or a tool that you've used along the way that's helped make things easier for you?
Oh, so two surprises. Surprise number one was being approached to have somebody approached me to be a guest who had exited from $200 million companies and told me that he was binging on all of the episodes of my show. So that was a surprise. I was like, I have somebody who's a binge listener. This is awesome. And he's like a serious dude. He's exited from $200 million companies and has now built his third company, and it's a big retreat company for executives. The second big surprise was months into the journey. Like, I think it was middle of this year. So at least a year and 3 or 4 months into the journey, one of our fellow podcasters, Sean Douglas, put something out on his feed, because he's always just like finding resources and sharing them with everybody, about this thing called Chartable, which I didn't know existed. And I didn't even know that the Men on Purpose podcast was a ranked podcast. I had no idea that it was a ranked podcast, and that it had actually ranked in the first 6 weeks of being launched. But I didn't know that until a year and a half later, when I got Chartable, and chartable.com is where you can go to put in your show and get what the rankings are. And it shows you the rankings on Apple and the rankings on Spotify, and it shows you the rankings for each episode and all the different countries. And so now I'm like, I check my Chartable on a regular basis every week. I'm like, oh, what's happening on Chartable? Because that was like a big celebration for me. I was like, oh my God, it's a top 200 ranked podcast, and I didn't even know it.
Chartable's a great tool. I think I'm big with my show over in like Istanbul or China.
Yeah, of course you are. Of course you are.
Not much of the States, but that's okay, because we have a niche aspect of things out there. But what bit of advice would you give to somebody who's listening to this right now, who's thinking about starting, or is he and hawing about reaching out to people to get them booked on their show? What's some bit of advice that you would give somebody?
Yeah, so I think you want to be really intentional about how the show serves you, because when you become a podcast host, you are serving your audience, you're serving your guests, you're serving your team with lots of work to do. You are in a servant leader role. And so you've got to be really clear and have a good strategy around how is this going to serve me and my business as well. And one thing I do is I actually did a little webinar called Prospering with Podcasting, where I talk pretty heavily around my model, which is my model is I have a high ticket offer that I work with people with, and that's how I monetize. And I've made almost 6 figures with just guests from my show, and that's just one piece of my business, right? So how is the podcast fitting into your business? It's is your podcast your business, or is your business being served by the podcast? And in my case, my business is being served by the podcast. So I use the podcast as a marketing tool and a lead generation tool, and it's given me almost 6 figures in income in the last year and a half between both of them. But I go out and speak on podcasts, and that's a different, marketing tool that I use when I go out and speak, and I send people to my free gift, and then they get my free gift and they have a little bit of nurturing, and they get invitations to have that conversation with me to move ahead. So you want to have strategic vision around what the podcast is going to do, how it's going to serve you and your business. I also think you've got to be really mindful about the name. The name is really important. You are very clear what your show is about. It's about no closers. It's the No Closers show, right? And so it's unmistakable what people are going to get. Mine is less niched than yours, but also very clear. They're going to hear Men on Purpose. They're going to hear Wickedly Smart Women. And those are the kinds of people I actually want to attract to be my clients. So it serves two purposes. It serves my business and it serves the listeners. So you want to be, have a strategic plan. You want to have a really good name. And then I really believe in the high ticket program. If you are anybody who's in the coaching space and you're using the show to generate clients and you don't have a high ticket program, meaning it's got to be at least a $5,000 program, preferably 10, maybe even more, then you need to work with somebody to design that intentionally so that it fits in with your business.
Yeah. Great words of advice out there. I love it. Love it, love it, love it out there.
And I do have a little gift.
Yes.
Gift
what's the gift?
Folks. Yeah. So I have a new thing that I've just built called it's my Wealth Readiness Quiz. And you can take the quiz to discern what your level of wealth readiness is. And that's at quiz.wealthylifementor.com. And you'll get the results right away of what your wealth readiness score is. And then when you're done getting your results, it takes less than 5 minutes to do the quiz. You'll also receive my Welcoming Wealth mini course, which feeds people over the course of a month. But every one of those emails in the course also invites people to have a conversation with me. So
good. Can you give me the URL one more time so I can put it in the chat roll?
Quiz, QUIZ .wealthylifementor.com. Quiz.wealthylifementor.com. Yeah, that's it right there.
Cool. I put it in the chat roll for those out there so that they can click on it. Once again, it's quiz.wealthylifementor.com, quiz.wealthylifementor.com. Go out there, click on it, and you're going to love what she shares with you guys and gals out there. Emerald, thank you so much for taking time on your Wednesday evening. I'm sure it's a little chillier up where you're at in New Hampshire, yeah?
Yeah, we're getting into that time of year. All the leaves are changing. We're almost at our peak, and right now it's 53 degrees, so it's a little bit chilly. It's almost time to turn on the fireplace.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, hey,
thanks so much for having me, Scott. What a pleasure.
Great interview. Thank you for being here. Thanks for sharing. More importantly than anything out here. Thank you for coming on and sharing. What you've gone into, your background. And for being real, like as Stephanie just said here, thank you for being real with us too, as well.
Yeah, I'm not going to do it if I'm not going to be able to be real, dude.
Amen to that. There's too much fakers out there.
Exactly. I got to be real and I got to have fun. And whenever Scott Carson says you want to do something, I know that's going to be fun. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. All right, guys and gals, that is going to wrap it up for this episode of the Podcasters live stream. Next week, we've got our buddy Gabriel Lucy coming and join us. We'll be talking about creating membership platforms. Gabriel runs a cool podcast that goes out to different golf courses and talks about the life and what's going on there. So definitely you want to join us for next week's episode as well if you ever want to put a membership site together or help to monetize your stuff that way. So otherwise, go out and make something happen, and we'll see you in the next podcast, everybody. Bye.